Hi, I'm Ben Giddis, and I'm the Associate Director for Economic Policy at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Thank you for joining us today for our event on unemployment insurance benefits administration. The COVID-19 pandemic put a spotlight on long-standing problems that have been plaguing unemployment and benefits administration. When job losses mounted and claims hit record levels, unemployment programs across the country were overwhelmed and some even crashed. This led to workers waiting weeks for benefits to arrive at a time of historic job loss and severe financial distress. The unemployment insurance system was also subject to substantial levels of fraud. According to the Government Accountability Office, at least $100 billion was stolen from unemployment insurance during the pandemic. To begin addressing these issues, the American Rescue Plan Act set aside funds for modernizing unemployment insurance, with three main objectives in mind: to reduce fraud, promote equitable access, and promote the timely payment of benefits. Under this initiative, the Department of Labor deployed tiger teams of specialized unemployment experts to work with states to identify what was preventing them from delivering benefits in an effective way and what could be done to help them improve their systems. At the Bipartisan Policy Center, we decided to launch a project to evaluate the impact of this tiger teams initiative, with the goal of identifying really what was preventing states from improving their systems and what were some best practices for them to take on for administrating benefits in a timely and effective way. And as part of this project, we ended up interviewing 11 state UI program directors from across the country and a very diverse group of people. So today we release our report detailing our key lessons learned. And at this event, you'll hear from my colleague, Justice Antonoli, who will present the findings of our report and our key lessons learned. We will then turn to my colleague, Jack Malday, who will moderate a panel discussion with 4 state UI directors who participated in this initiative, so you can hear from their experiences firsthand. So without further ado, I will turn it over to my colleague, Justice. Thank you, and Justice, take it away.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you all those who are joining today. My name is Justice Antonoli. I'm a research analyst at the Bipartisan Policy Center, and I'm one of the co-authors of this report. I'm happy to share with you all an overview of our report, which was released today. In this report, we assess the Tiger Teams initiative, and we also assess ongoing efforts to modernize or improve unemployment insurance. So if I could bring up the slides, please. So to begin, the question might be, what was the Tiger Teams initiative? Well, to answer that question, I have to go back to what Ben said in his opening address. The Department of Labor got an influx of funds for them to invest into the unemployment insurance system. As part of this money, they announced in November 2021 the Tiger Teams initiative. This came at a time where there was a series of other grants made available to states for them to make improvements to their systems that fall under each of the 3 pillars: equity, fraud, and timeliness. But the Tiger Teams initiative was a further step. This was direct technical assistance provided to the states for them to do a series of things. And along with this technical assistance came actionable recommendations and additional funds for states to apply for. So the DOL created this team of experts, and the experts on this team span beyond that of just unemployment insurance policy and the nuances of unemployment insurance administration. This expertise included fraud prevention specialists, project managers, and computer engineers, just to name a few. This process was entirely voluntary. No state was forced to do this, but they were directed to reach out to the Department of Labor with their interest. 36 states reached out to the department, which you can see on our map on the right. As of August 2023, 33 states had met with the Tiger Teams and 3 states had ongoing assessments. Each state that participated had an opportunity to discuss with the Tiger Teams the program's background, its status, and future programmatic goals. The Tiger Teams worked with the states to determine the best plans to recover from the pandemic and also to improve their programs moving forward. So what we did is we wanted to understand the Tiger Teams initiative, and we also wanted to understand what was going into these modernization efforts. So we interviewed 11 state directors, 4 of which are on our panel today. We interviewed DOL officials that oversaw the Tiger Teams. And we interviewed NASWA officials that worked closely with the target teams. We also reached out to several claimant advocacy groups from participating states to gather their perspective on what is needed to modernize UI. The states that we interviewed represented various geographical regions, and they had various different political landscapes. Another distinction between the states is their IT modernization status. This is critical because a modernized unemployment insurance system should run on modern technology. However, many of these states still operate on outdated legacy systems known as COBOL. Our interviews spanned February to June 2023, and through these interviews, we were able to assess state impressions, to distill key insights, and generate 14 lessons learned from the target teams. So what did the states think of the target teams? It was largely well received. States were eager for an opportunity to access additional funding, and they welcomed outside expertise from an impartial team of experts that was specifically designed to help them think through ways to strengthen the program. They appreciated that it was an individualized experience, and they had tailored recommendations that fit their unique needs, and it was not a one-size-fits-all approach. They also appreciated that they received a list of recommendations, which they ultimately had the autonomy to choose from. Now, while this was a largely successful initiative, we also were able to identify instances of occasional confusion that started early on in the process of the state's review. While they appreciated their autonomy, this autonomy was not clear to every state when they were first reviewing the target team's recommendations. There was also instances where they questioned the funding level and timelines of specific initiatives, and instances where they were unsure of how to modify the grant if they ran into obstacles somewhere down the line as they were implementing a recommendation. So while we went through this, we generated key insights, and it became very clear to us how interconnected each pillar was and how important IT modernization was. This is sort of the glue that kept everything together. While one single initiative may fall directly under one pillar, it does not operate independently of the other two pillars. For example, fraud prevention improves timeliness and equity. When states are already dealing with a lot of things in their plate, increased fraud is just another layer of complexity for states to deal with. And every resource, including time spent on investigating fraud, is less resources, less time spent in other areas of the program. Equity improves fraud and improves timeliness. When states make the system easier to understand, there are less errors. When there are less errors, there are less suspicious claims. When there are less suspicious claims, there are less of a demand to investigate for fraud. Also, when there are less errors, there are less problems that state staff need to solve, and leads to an overall streamlined process. Also, initiatives to improve timeliness and help with fraud, and they help with equity. When there's new technology implemented for states to be able to track a claim throughout its lifeline, and therefore be able to track claimant records and track investigative processes, everything flows smoothly. But at the center of it all is IT modernization. It cannot be overstated how important it is for a highly effective UI system to have modernized technology. States are still functioning on COBOL, and they find it difficult to improve their programs while operating on COBOL. And we all have experienced a software update at some point in time. We understand how important it is to have up-to-date technology. Also, we came up with 14 lessons, which I won't go through all today, but I direct the audience to go to our report to read the report and also review our lessons. But I wanted to highlight a few lessons that stuck out to us and were common across all of the states that we interviewed. So while I spoke about the importance of IT modernization, we also found out just how difficult this is for states. It's a multi-year initiative that's highly demanding on their staff and takes a lot of time and a lot of money that they often don't have access to. We learned about the importance of enhanced identity proofing using biometric data to prevent fraud. But we also learned how this new technology is confusing for states, and there's a lot of unanswered questions on how this new technology is administered. We learned how important it is to have adequate language translations, and also for states to use plain language rather than complex legal jargon. This makes the system more accessible to everyone. And finally, we learned about the various uses of technology and automation that states are using to revamp their processes and to better serve constituents, freeing up staff time to investigate fraud and to uphold an equitable system. I want to thank you all again for attending, and I encourage you to read our report, which was released this morning. It can be found on our website and on the YouTube description and on our various social medias. If there's one thing that I want people to know is that the Tiger Teams was a true partnership between the federal government and the states, and it turned out to benefit the states. And this is important because UI modernization is a collaborative and continuous process. I'll now pass it over to my colleague, Jack, and our distinguished panel to share their experiences with the Tiger Teams. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice, and thank you, Ben. To introduce myself, my name is Jack Malday. I'm a Senior Policy Analyst at the Bipartisan Policy Center, and I am delighted to welcome 4 state UI directors who contributed to our report. Each panelist saw the disruption of COVID up close. They were at the heart of the engagement with DOL's Tiger Teams, and they're engaged in ongoing efforts to modernize their state UI programs. So I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion. And I'll just introduce the panelists. So we have Susan Dickinson. Susan is Director of the Office of Unemployment Compensation Benefits Policy at the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry. We also have Christopher O'Brien. Christopher is Security Commission. We have Daryl Dudzinski, Deputy Commissioner at the Connecticut Department of Labor. And we have Michael Berg. Michael is Unemployment Compensation Bureau Director at New Hampshire Employment Security. So it's a great lineup. And to those listening online, you can submit questions using the live chat on YouTube or on the X platform, formerly Twitter, using the hashtag BPCLive. So let's get into the discussion. So I'd like to start with going back to the beginning, I guess, with the COVID pandemic. We heard that COVID really was a disruptor and exposed a lot of vulnerabilities in UI. So I want to hear from each state, each of the panelists, what were the challenges of COVID and what lessons did you learn during that period? So let's start with you, Susan. What did you learn?
Sure, thank you. And it's actually an interesting concept when a pandemic like that occurs, or any type of major event. The important part is what we've done before that event and not when it actually hits. So that's exactly where these Tiger Team initiatives come in, is to prepare us for the future. You'd never see, an NFL team show up on the very first day for the very first game for the first time and then just play the game. I mean, there's a whole off season, all this training, and that's what we're looking to do. We have in Pennsylvania 10 Tiger Team projects. We've got them all going on at the same time, and we're trying to make everything better before we get to the next stage where we might, have chaos and might have a lot of claims and things that we need to do. So that's our biggest takeaway. There was a lot of detailed things that were new to us in the pandemic, of course, but right now we're trying to learn from all that and use this grant money to get ready for the next time.
Great, thanks for that, Susan. And Christopher, I'll bring you in here. What was your experience during COVID, and what did you guys learn in Oklahoma?
Yeah, so that quote from Monty Python, that nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition, nobody could have expected this, right? We're so used to planning for the next economic downturn. 08, 09 taught us a lot of lessons, but nobody expected something like this. So just from a business perspective, being able to take, nearly 500 staff and make them remote somehow. Nobody had laptops. That was a big deal. And then how do we proceed from there? That was a big issue for us, shutting down those offices, everybody going home to their home office, not understanding what to do. We were, it's embarrassing to say, but the more you talk to other states, the less embarrassed you are, how behind and how unprepared we were just from a basic level. I know some folks that didn't understand how to maybe create a PowerPoint to maybe train staff remotely on policy guidance, processes, procedures. Just so used to going into that office with a book and saying, all right, turn to page 15, here we go, let's learn about UI. That was a very difficult thing to do. And I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit more later on, but pandemic era policy really impacted us from an ID verification perspective that really invited all the bad actors from around the world to come. We essentially rang the dinner bell. So that was a big one.
Yeah, thanks for that, Christopher. I know it certainly was a shock to all of us. Daryl, I'll pass it to you. What were your lessons learned during COVID?
Well, thank you. Yeah, there's plenty of lessons learned, and we heard some of the high points, but I think a couple of the most important concepts is that the unemployment insurance program became one of the financial safety nets for the country and was utilized as such. So that's very important for us to remember, and quite frankly, a proud moment for the UI unemployment insurance program. But it is extremely important, and we have to continue to be prepared. For Connecticut, over 40 years, 4 decades of trying to modernize, and we were going down that path since 2016. So we were running dual processes going into COVID, modernizing, preparing for a modern system while updating and improving our legacy, 6 legacy systems. So we're implementing the CARES Act programs on legacy systems and serving tens of thousands of customers every day. At the same time, in a parallel path, we were building out our modernized effort in a consortium with Mississippi and Maine, which we're very proud of. And that effort was a success starting July 5th, 2022.
Thanks for that, Daryl. I think you make a brilliant point. COVID really showed how important UI is and how important it is for UI to really be resilient in the face of the next crisis. So I'll pass over to Michael. Michael, what were your challenges and lessons learned during COVID?
I think one of the biggest challenges that I think all of the states faced is that just prior to the pandemic, we were at almost record low unemployment rates. And the way our agencies are funded is on a resource justification model, which is the more claims, the more money, the less claims, the less money. So we entered the pandemic at record low staffing levels. I think that's kind of one of the biggest challenges, because no matter how much planning you can put in place, you can't staff up fast enough for something like a pandemic. And I think one of the things that Tiger teams really helped me to look at are ways that we can improve efficiencies so that we can work a little bit smarter when a pandemic or recession hits, and we can invest more of our energies in actually processing claims, less time in having to answer claimant questions or respond to those types of inquiries. Because what Tiger team showed us is there's ways to present this information to claimants up front to communicate better through plain language, through status trackers. And they've also, the other recommendations that came through Tiger teams in improving operations, how we can move things a little bit more quickly, kind of get away from a paper world into a more automated world, and make a lot of our operations much more efficient. So I think that's one of the lessons I learned through the pandemic, is that we have to find ways to work smarter so that we don't have to work harder. That's what I think I found.
Absolutely, and you've sort of moved us on quite nicely to the next topic I want to cover, which is the Tiger teams and what the experience was working with the Tiger teams. So let's start with Daryl at this time. We heard in the presentation there were positives, generally quite a few positives. There were also some negatives. So I'd be very interested to hear from all of you. Let's start with you, Daryl. What was your experience like with the Tiger teams?
Sure, Jack. So Connecticut was one of the first states to volunteer for consideration with United States Department of Labor and the Tiger Team Initiative back in 2021. And it's kind of crazy to think like where we were in the height of the pandemic, massive unemployment, again, running a system on legacy, multiple systems and legacy technology, while building out a new system with the same platform of CARES Act and so forth. And we took this on because we knew we needed some help and minor help with our legacy system because it was short-lived, but also to prepare us with our modernization effort that could be leveraged with our other two states, Mississippi and Maine, again in the consortium. So we're very pleased to have a multi-part process that was through Grant Thornton or now called Guidehouse. We had NASWA, the National Association of State Workforce Agencies, associations working with us. And so the first two initiatives was to continue the employer support of the SIDES component, which is State Information Data Exchange System. It's a national platform for employers to communicate with the states around separation information and so forth, real time. And we wanted to continue that in legacy, in which the Tiger Team Initiative enabled us to do so. So that was a real positive for our employer community, but also improved, as you said, the integrity of the system and improves the timeliness and so forth. So we were very pleased in that area. The second was amazing because prior to the pandemic, we weren't prepared, like all states, for the imposter claim activities and levels and the sophistication behind them. These are criminals. So we had built out an amazing platform of integrity concepts in our legacy database, which is really a throwaway, and we knew that. So going into the new system, we wanted to bring a lot of those enhancements that we developed in legacy into the modernized system, and Tiger Teams allowed us to do so. And we saved millions and millions of dollars by preventing the criminals from accessing our system at go live. And that's really important for states that are preparing to go live with a new system because the criminals are going to try and you're almost the target. So we were prepared there. Now that we have been live for almost 2 years now, we are using initiatives under the Tiger Team called Phase 2 to improve the integrity of the system, building out platforms and cloud-based technologies that we can build upon with other federal grants such as integrity and so forth. But under Tiger Teams, we're focusing on mostly the integrity of the program. We're looking at fictitious employer schemes, and we're moving forward with, again, the cloud platforms and just building out that technology. And we have a few more efforts that are underway as soon as we build out the platform, the base.
Great, thank you for sharing that. I guess like the technical expertise the Tiger Teams brought was really helpful. Let's hear from Christopher. What was your experience working with the Tiger Teams?
Yeah, so we were a little bit late to the game. We're still sorting out some pandemic era stuff that kind of caused us to drag our feet a little bit and question whether the level of involvement and engagement be worth the dollar amount. Now we can say, hey, $2.4 million, that's a lot of money, but in this space, it's not, and it goes real fast. And if we're talking about recommendations such as, multi-factor authentication or other tools that you could use to help prevent fraudulent activity, we're talking about products that are subscription-based, subscription fees, licensing, maintenance, etc. And do we want to spend, grant dollars, one-time influx of cash on something that we're going to be left kind of holding the bill on year over year as we move down the road? And so we said, yeah, so we've got some of this in place. We're not going to put it everywhere that maybe you're suggesting and increase the cost of that. We're doing some other things. And I think once we got past that initial stage of just kind of going back and forth and what our needs and wants were, suddenly, the sun came out, the clouds parted, and we've had a pretty good relationship since then, directly going to impact us being able to replace our data document management system. I could spend the next hour telling you how awful it is, but we won't do that. But everything from implementing AI to automation, things that probably our friends in Connecticut, they're so far down the line in modernizing might seem silly, but implementing QR codes, advanced capture, again, anything we can do to help automate the process. Employer verification and access application, better ID fraud cross-matching in databases, we are going to be able to do a lot here. Again, being late to the game, these are our projects, and we haven't. We've just initially started them, so we're not quite down the road as some of our friend states are.
Well, thanks for that, Christopher. I'm glad things got better as the process went on. I'll bring Michael in here. Michael, what was your experience working with the Tiger teams?
Sure. So I at the very start, I was a little reluctant to participate with the Tiger teams for some of the same reasons that Christopher mentioned. We were still in the midst of the pandemic. New Hampshire is a very small state, so we don't have a lot of extra resources. And the commitment that Tiger teams was seeking was significant. Nevertheless, we decided to give it a try. And I'm extremely glad we did. You know, one of the things that can happen, or at least in our case, I think we can become a little bit complacent because we don't oftentimes have much funding. We don't oftentimes have the ability or the resources to make the kinds of improvements that we know are necessary in our agencies. I think that the opportunities presented by Tiger teams, not only through the funding, but actually to have somebody come in and take a look at all of our operations from a different point of view was extremely valuable. There were things that certainly, you know, I could see that there was a problem, but couldn't see how to fix it. And I think Tiger teams could bring in insights from other states, from, you know, other folks, other experts that again can just take a different approach in the way that we look at things. And I think that has guided me not only, I think, in the grants that I've been able to access through Tiger teams, but also in other grants and other things that I'm doing throughout the department. I'm always looking at it or trying to find that new perspective, that new way to look at this, a new way to do things that is not what we've been doing for the last 30 years. And I think that was probably the most important outtake for me from Tiger teams is to constantly be in that position where you're re-looking at everything you're doing and trying to find ways to find efficiencies and do them better, and incorporating technology as a part of that. That being said, you know, one of the other things that I think we have to be cautious of, and I think Christopher alluded to that as well, is we have to be careful that we don't bring in so many pieces of software that we're bogged down with all of these licensing fees that we can't afford in the long term when the grant money runs out. Our funding hasn't changed, and these grants are short term. So we have to be very cautious in how we allocate these funds and making sure that we're not incurring ongoing expenses that we cannot continue to afford. So yeah. I hope that's
absolutely
helpful.
Absolutely, that's a great point. And Susan, what was your experience working with the Tiger teams? Do you agree with the other panelists? Anything else that you want to add, or anything you disagree with?
Well, our approach at first was certainly like Michael's, where we're skeptical, but that's because we're not strangers to these grants. And for anyone who doesn't know, they're called supplemental budget requests. We refer to them as SBRs, and the Department of Labor has been giving SBRs for decades. I mean, they're just a common thing that usually occurs. I think 2019 was the only year where we saw them not offer any SBRs because unemployment was so low. Instead, they just gave the states the money in their base grants. So we're no strangers to these grants, and we know every time that these grants come around, there are strings. So of course, you want to know what the strings are before you get yourself into something, and you want to understand what it is you're going to have to do, to actually do these projects. So, you go into it with skepticism, but we did have a good experience with the Tiger team. When they came in to do our evaluation, I think we ended up with a pretty good mix of projects which we said would help us, and projects that the Tiger team, really USDOL behind the scenes, would like to see the states do. So out of the 10 projects, there's a good mix of things that we asked for and things that are just recommended to us that we, didn't think of before. So we ended up actually, the way that these grants were going to go was they have all these recommendations, but you don't do them all at once. You do them in waves. They're trying to be quick wins done in 6 months. So, you do them maybe not one at a time, but in chunks. But we actually have changed in Pennsylvania. We're actually doing all 10 at once. And that is made possible by the fact that these grants came with free project management support. And I can't stress enough how helpful that has been to us. There's no way we could take on all of these ourselves if it's up to me and my staff to run every project. I mean, this isn't even our only grant. We have other grants going on. So we have a lot of projects happening. And out of the 10 Tiger Team grants, Pennsylvania is managing 4 of them. And they're actually kind of smaller, easier ones. And we have 4 of the projects that Guidehouse is managing for us through that offer of free project management services and other things besides project management. These are offered to the states free through the program with DOL. And plus the remaining 2, we are working with NASWA, the National Association of State Workforce Agencies. They are also offering their services to manage these projects. So with all of that together, that means we can embark on all 10 projects. Obviously, the sooner you get things done, the sooner you reap the benefits. So that's been very helpful to us. And of course, some of them are longer than 6 months for sure. Depending on the topic, that's what you have to do. You want quality. You don't want to just rush. So it is very helpful that we have all of this support in order to get these done, not just the grant money.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's a really good point that the assistance you need is not only the technical assistance, but also project management. And as Justice was outlining earlier, the Tiger teams came with all this diverse expertise. So thank you all for your perspectives on the Tiger teams. I'd like to move on just to talking about ongoing modernization efforts and initiatives that the states are implementing, whether they be Tiger teams recommendations or otherwise. I know that all of you guys are working to make improvements across the 3 pillars that Justice outlined. So tackling fraud, equitable access, and timeliness of payments. So let's start with the tackling fraud, which is obviously a huge issue. I know, Christopher, I know that you in Oklahoma have been implementing a lot of initiatives to tackle fraud. It would be great to hear more from you about what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. And so maybe not so much related to the Tiger teams, even though some of those dollars are going to be used in this space, but other grants that have been made available, like the Integrity Grant, has helped us implement a number of tools and kind of like support them over the years. This stuff, tech in this space is not cheap, right? It's pretty expensive. So they've been able to help us prop up our online ID verification application. It's branded as Verify OK. We early on decided the best idea was to utilize this as a gatekeeper to the application process. I know there's states that probably differ on their opinion on where this type of process should take place before or after the claim. We decided to shut the door up front, keeping equity in mind, and I'll touch on that in a moment. But we were able to overnight, when we stood it up and went live, eliminate close to 88-89% of all the fraudulent activity that was taking place. And as we continue to build out improve the algorithms and the logic behind the application, it just gets better and better and better. And you can say, okay, well, you're stopping the bad guys from getting in, but how many are good guys? We've been able to hit a 1.5% false positive rate in Oklahoma, in addition to continued support from USDOL and the USPS pilot program that we were the second state to join that pilot program. That allows us to be more creative and more aggressive, really upfront, when we're stopping the bad actors from even reaching the application, because now we've got equity in mind. We're allowing equitable access. There are more places that you can verify your identity in person. As a matter of fact, there are over 19,000 USPS locations across the country that can do this. The issue there is, in back to funding, and I'll never stop talking about funding, like probably my friends in the conversation right now will, is that this is just a pilot program. And as huge amount of success as we've had within Oklahoma, it's just funded for 2 years. We may have a year left with this being funded. Quotes have kind of ranged in the $6 to $7 per transaction range when it comes to if we had to pay for this and it wasn't funded. So we really need more funding. We could use more money and funding year over year for IT modernization. We also would appreciate ongoing funding with this pilot program, because again, we have to balance the integrity of the program with equitable access. That's a tough balance, and it's a tricky dance, but I feel like we do a really good job of it here in Oklahoma, as do other states. But boy, funding.
Absolutely, funding's key. Christopher, you mentioned the USPS pilot program. Do you mind just telling us a little bit more about what was that pilot program?
Sure. We entered into this just after our friends next door in Arkansas did in 2023. We went live, I believe, in June or July of 2023. And I believe within the first 2 weeks, we saw such a dramatic decrease in the number of folks going into our American Job Centers to verify ID in person. Again, it's great to have many locations, again, over 19,000 USPS retail locations across the country where one can go in person if they can't. Maybe they don't have the technology in hand to be able to verify their ID over the phone. I know a lot of our friend states use some other vendors that's not what we use in Oklahoma for online ID verification, but not a lot of folks can, and they need to make that trip. I believe in the 95 to 98% of USPS locations are within 5 to 10 miles of a residence. We don't have that many AJCs in Oklahoma. So again, that was a huge equity play for us to get involved in that pilot. So we can, again, be more aggressive and creative when it comes to ID proofing. But we're about a year into this, going on a year here pretty soon. It's 2 years worth of funding. And then the states who are part of this program, if they want to stay in it, it would cost us potentially. So it's worked for us. It's worked for most of the states that I stay in communication with. And it would hurt equity if this was something that wasn't funded once the pilot ends.
Yeah, and it's something we emphasize in our report, just the absolute how essential it is to have a variety of means to prove your identity, whether it be in person or otherwise. So thanks for sharing that. And Daryl, I want to turn this to you. I know that Connecticut is also doing a lot to tackle fraud. So it'd be great to hear more about what you're doing.
Certainly, and so yes, it's an extremely important topic. We have integrity components throughout the claim process, and we are able to analyze immediately and then through different processes. We are looking at, we're talking about device fingerprinting, ID proofing, with multi-vendor support, including we've used the term NASWA and their Identity Data Hub, Integrity Data Hub, IDH, which I think that the states are doing amazing work in detecting and preventing the criminal activities, but at a national platform, NASWA, IDH really excelled and allowed us to communicate among each state and also offer these are bad actors, and so we can share that throughout the country on this national platform. And again, this is at a no cost to all states. Really, really important. During the pandemic and subsequent, we worked with our bank, financial institution, in making sure that the monies that were going out the door were going to the right people, and if they were detected not to be, we were pulling those monies back. As far as on a criminal level, we worked with the state officials, state police, criminal, the crime activities. We worked with law enforcement, with the Office of Chief State's Attorney. And on the federal level, we worked with the FBI and the Office of Inspector General. But again, back to the state level, our Chief State's Attorney is a partner with us through funding of U.S. Department of Labor that we're able to continue fighting these criminals. When we find them through the investigative arm of the chief states, they will be arrested and they're prosecuted in Connecticut, going down that fraud activities. And it's been very successful. It's something that we initiated back on the Great Recession. And so we were able to move forward during the pandemic and resurrect that activity. And they're now excelling once again.
That's great. And Daryl, you mentioned NASWA's IDH, Integrity Data Hub. Do you mind just explaining a little bit more for the audience? You know, what is IDH and how it helps?
So it allows us to provide our unemployment insurance claim activity on a national platform, and then they're able to run queries, multiple queries, and let the states know that based on their understanding on their data and their sophisticated software, that these particular claims have a high percentage that could be deemed imposter. Also, through this effort, we can verify different types of other databases, such as the bank account verification, if they're in prison, and other areas within that level of sophistication. But what also is important is you can share ideas, and that's really important because the criminals are very smart and they're always changing. And so you're also dealing with not just a claim being filed, but you have the employer level as well, where they're creating companies that do not exist, and they're using that platform to try to steal from the insurance program. So NASWA allows for, again, open communication, detection, and ongoing fraud schemes being communicated and results going back to each state.
Thanks for explaining that. So moving on to the next pillar, equitable access. Michael, I want to bring you in here. I know you in New Hampshire have initiatives to really enhance equitable access. So it'd be great to hear from you on that.
Sure. There were a number of Tiger Team recommendations that came to New Hampshire that involved equitable access. And I think I'd mentioned earlier that's one of the areas, and I think we weren't really doing very well here in New Hampshire. So we had a couple of programs. Translation was one. We had a recommendation to provide to better translation, and we originally were approaching this through hiring a Spanish translator, because Spanish is the largest non-English spoken language in New Hampshire, and we were going to have this person not only work through communications that we don't already have in Spanish translated, but also to be able to follow a claimant up through the appeals process and actually sit with them as a translator to bring them through an appeals process. So I thought that would be great to be able to do that. But emerging technologies now have presented much better options, and this is where I think it's important that we have the ability to modify grants as going forward. New Hampshire is modifying this grant, and DOL is being very cooperative with that. So we are still hiring our Spanish translator. We're going to absorb that with state funds because I still see the value in that. However, now we're going to be able to bring in an AI translation program that will provide translation in real time bilaterally. So out in the claimant's native language and back in English to the folks that are working on the claims. This didn't exist as recently as 2 years ago when Tiger Teams was coming through New Hampshire. And I think that's extremely important. And the same is true for plain language. We had originally looked at contracting with a behavioral insights vendor through NASWA to assist us in developing plain language. We were going to look at the top the highest priority documents that we have that go out to claimants, and we would translate them into plain language. And then state staff would then go and manually translate everything else after they had been trained in the process. Technology today, now there's AI that can come in. It can translate everything into plain language for us. So what our plan now is, we are still using the behavioral insights vendor with NASWA. But what we're going to do is we're going to incorporate the AI program, translate our information into plain language, then have our behavioral insights vendor review it. That's an important thing about if you're going to incorporate AI at all, is that there's a human component. And in this case, we have access to experts in the field to then review that information. So I really think that we are going to have one incredible program as far as translation, plain language. Our communications are going to increase tenfold. But I think an important point to make here, is that, and I'm going to say another recommendation that came through Tiger Teams was the use of robotic process automation. And I had talked earlier about improving some of our processes, and things like robotic process automation can do that. But even since that recommendation was made, now there is AI, and I'm not going to use a vendor's name, but they've developed a Power Automate program that utilizes AI that would allow us to take that same kind of technology, utilize it on multiple use cases throughout our agency without incurring additional expense. So technology is changing at a rapid rate right now with AI. And I think it's going to be real important. And New Hampshire is doing that right now. We're looking at every grant, every recommendation that was made. And we're not changing the recommendations, we're enhancing them and looking for ways to enhance them through bringing in AI technologies. There is just some incredible gains happening in that field. And I think people are sometimes maybe steered in the wrong direction by the press that's out there, because the AI you see on TV is not the AI we're using in government. So, but it's amazing, and I think it's important that we continue to look at these emerging technologies as we are working these grants, and don't be afraid, again, to modify them, to take a second look, to see if you can take those recommendations and even grow upon them.
I think that's a great point, and I'm very glad you're using AI, because I think the efficiency gains there are so great. But also at the same time, happy that you said you're not forgetting about the human component. So that's great, Michael. And I just want to move to the final pillar, timeliness. So Susan, I'll bring this to you. What is Pennsylvania doing to improve the timeliness of payments?
Two of our Tiger Team projects, which are our favorites about timeliness. One of them is internal facing, actually. It's about our internal procedures. I've been with the Pennsylvania Unemployment Program since 2006. And I can tell you, since even before then, staff have been working on trying to upgrade our procedures, upgrade the way it's written, the way staff can search things, and it's just a slog. It seems like it's taking forever. We had a gentleman who retired after 40 years, and he said one of the first things he was charged with when he started there was trying to update our procedures. So it's been even longer than some modernization projects in some states. But I mean, we've always had our procedures, but they're in constant need of update. It seems like we can never keep updates going with the pace that things change in this program. So what the Tiger Team grant had provided to us was the funding in order to move this into an online type of format. It's internal, but it is just like an internal on Google. Staff can just type in, in the search what they need and generally find what they want. We're still in the process, even though we've launched it. We're in the process. There's still a lot of things that we can improve about it. We're getting feedback from staff. We've taken surveys, find what they like about it, what they don't like about it. And there's, when you change formats, it's not just a matter of changing the format, but now it means a whole other thing to your content. So we do want to upgrade all of our content, but of course now we're just in the first stages of seeing how the new technology works. So far, the response has been very positive, and most staff are excited with the fact that they don't have to know which folder on our shared drive to go into, which PDF to open, which Word document to open to find what they need. When you have someone on the phone and they have a question right then, and you may not know the answer, you just want to be able to search that in, to put that in a search bar and find it right away. We're all used to doing that in our personal lives now with Google. So, they're looking for the same thing there, and that has been a great help. I think it'll be even better once we've had some time to make further improvements to it. It'll be pretty fantastic. The other project that we have regarding timeliness, we noticed that our employers were not responding to our notices, so that we can move forward with adjudication issues and coming up with determinations on people's eligibility. Pennsylvania is, I'm going to say we were brave to go live with a new system in June 2021. So we had the legacy system written in COBOL that Justice had mentioned in the opening remarks. And then we modernized, June 2021, we went live. And since then, employer response has not been very good. So what we have done is use one of these grants to find out from employers where their hurdles are, and come up with recommendations. The Tiger team is using that information to provide us with recommendations, and then they're going to also provide us with the support to implement those recommendations to try to get employer information in a much more timely way, help employers do what they need to do to provide the information we need to make decisions. So it has been, we're still in the early stages of that project. It's been a few months, but already we've come up with a lot of different insights. Guidehouse has interviewed a lot of our employers and third-party administrators, and has gotten some great insights from them. So we hope that project will also help us tremendously with our timeliness and backlog.
That's great. Thank you to all the panelists for taking us through those initiatives. We do have about 8 more minutes. I want to turn to some audience questions we've been receiving. So the first one is a very good question. It's what are the biggest gaps or concerns for the next pandemic, to be ready for the next pandemic? And so I'm happy. Who wants to jump in here? This is a pretty big question.
I'd be happy to start. I think one of my biggest concerns is that technology is moving along at such a rapid pace at the moment that we may be essentially behind the 8 ball by the time we finish all these grants. As I said earlier, I'm re-looking at a lot of my projects because they're already essentially outdated, and I need to re-look at them because of AI. And so my biggest fear is that states won't be in as good a position as, say, the bad actors at the time the next recession comes around, because they will have access to all of this technology, and we may find ourselves 5 or 10 years behind again. And in this case, 5 or 10 years is going to be a lifetime because technology is moving along so quickly. So I think that's my biggest fear, is that while this money is available right now, the technology is kind of emerging at the same time. Will we be able to take advantage of that so that we're not caught short in the next round? So, and I'll yield to somebody else, but that would be my biggest concern.
I'll go next, I guess. So I actually have 2, just a reminder of the human nature behind all this and PTSD. I mean, we as state unemployment insurance administrators were working 12, 16 plus hours every day at the start, during, and post-pandemic. And we were exposed to the same health and critical scares as everybody else, lost loved ones during the pandemic. So I think with that perspective, we have to be careful, and hopefully we never are in a pandemic again worldwide, but we have to remember that there's a human nature behind all this, and we're here to serve our neighbors, our constituents, and so forth. But there's also that piece where we were impacted as well. And secondly, a different point is that if we were to enact the federal programs once again, that we have clear instructions that are solidified, not changing, and also build in integrity so that we're not just racing as states to implement these programs and be the first or several states to pay, but let's do it properly, and let's do it with the scope of integrity and compliance.
That's great. Susan, Christopher, you want to jump in on this question? Yep, Christopher.
There we go. Yeah, I will just say that, I think we say every day, gosh, I hope we're learning our lesson. And unfortunately, I look back at, pandemic era policy that's still in existence that kind of prevents us from, ensuring the integrity of the program today, and saying, why haven't we gone back and amended some of this policy, or just kind of, gotten rid of it, or improved upon it? And we haven't. So I have to question whether we've learned anything. And what keeps me up at night are, these criminal organizations that exist in Haiti, Nigeria, Ukraine, Russia, China. They were all communicating with one another just after 9/11. They were prepared for this. We weren't. They're going to be prepared for the next one, whether it's, let's not even think about anything like COVID, or it's just a terrible economic downturn. They'll be prepared. Will we have the funding to be prepared? They are funded. We unwillingly funded them during the pandemic. They got the money. So they're always going to be prepared, and the hope is that we will be too. That's the one that keeps me up at night. Well, that and funding, both of them. So I hardly sleep.
And I can just finally add to that, at least for Pennsylvania, this in-between time that I was talking about before, our biggest win will be if we can plain speak and make instructions easier for people. I often say that the issue with the unemployment program is that the program is so complicated. Even if we plain speak absolutely everything and it's as easy as it can be, people will still be confused because the program is confusing. So the more we can have people self-serve, and there are certainly people who don't want self-service. They want service from us, which is great. I'm happy to help them. Staff can help, handhold them, walk them through, that's fine. But there's plenty of people out there who do want to self-serve, and it's often difficult for them because they don't understand the wording. Things would go a lot easier for them, and they'd be happy with it if they could just handle it on their own. So that'll be what we're working toward to make sure we're ready by the time it happens.
Great. Well, there are much time left. I guess one question, I think we have time for maybe one person to comment on this. I would be, Michael was talking a lot about AI and the use of AI. I would be interested in if one of the other three panelists has found, is also sort of embracing AI in their modernization efforts, and if so, if it has been helpful.
So for Connecticut, we are embracing areas of AI, and we're looking at it in the lens of our consortium effort with Mississippi and Maine. And we're focusing right now on the Consumer Contact Center, where there's a lot of areas that can be improved through the use of AI. We also talked about the robotic processing. I think that's equally important because it allows you to take common areas of high frequency, repetitive, and move that more into that robotic process. And we've done that in the past with success. And so those are areas that you have to continue to entertain and hopefully utilize, because you're never going to have enough staff to do the work you need in government around the unemployment insurance program. With the highs and lows on the economy, it allows AI and our robotic processing allows you to prepare your staff for other things that are to come. And we all know things change, and that helps us be prepared with the staff that could be available.
Thank you for that, Daryl. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. But I want to thank all of the panelists for joining us today. I think it was really, really interesting speaking to all of you and hearing your perspectives. And I would like to thank everyone as well who's tuned in online. I hope you found the session interesting. And I would urge everyone to read our report, which was posted on the BPC website this morning. And if you have any questions or any comments and you'd like to engage with us on this issue, you can feel free to email us at economy@bipartisanpolicy.org. So we are at BPC hoping we will be doing more work on this really, really important issue. So we'd be happy to hear from you guys. And with that, I think I will just thank my panelists one last time. It was great having you guys.
Thanks for having us.